leaving people behind is not a huge fear of mine. I don't know why. I think it's because in my mind it's like I have to do this. You know what I mean? If I don't keep going, I'm jeffed. I'm going to get left behind if I don't keep going.
There's certain people out there that have so much self-belief and so much natural abilities and so much potential that I think they know deep down that if I were to really harness this and do something with it, I would have to say goodbye to so many of the people I love.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another very special, as always, episode of Next Level University, where we teach you how to level up your life, your love, your health, and your wealth. We hope you enjoyed our latest episode. It was last week's Meetup Monday, what to do when the going gets tough. Today, for episode number 635, are you more afraid to be left behind or to leave people behind?
What a question.
What a question. When I started this journey, I assumed, because this is the way I was wired, that people were more afraid to be left behind. That people assume that they might fail or they're not good enough, dealing with that. From group coaching and working with clients and understanding you and learning about you at a deeper level, I am realizing, and I think you're realizing now too, that many people are actually afraid to leave people behind.
Yeah. So the reason why this episode came up is because we've had a few people in group coaching. We do a little bit of live coaching. So there's 6 sessions, and the third session is actually a deep and vulnerable conversation.
My favorite,
where we talk.
my favorite
it
session. It
really is. Well, you made it.
I appreciate that.
And it's basically, let's get vulnerable about our limiting beliefs. And Kevin and I, there's a volunteer, and they tell us what their biggest limiting belief is, and then we live coach about it. We live rumble with it, so to speak. And one person basically came out and said that they're afraid of failure. And when we did, and if you're a long-term listener to the show, you kind of know what we're referring to, but the 7 whys, it's basically you ask the question why a bunch of times. Sometimes it's 9, sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's 7. But basically you get to the root issue, the root fear. Whenever you're wanting to do something but not following through, usually there's a fear. One of my deepest fears was not being a failure, but actually being successful, because the more successful I was, the less relatable I was, and the less in common I had with those around me. Excuse me. And so if you think about it this way, this is kind of the frame. Every single human being, as you know, we've talked about often, has core aspirations, core values, and core beliefs. If I have core aspirations that are very, very, very large, and I truly believe that I can achieve them, I'm going to have to value things very differently than those around me. Beliefs are about your past, values are about your present, and aspirations are about your future. If you aren't aligned with your core beliefs, core values, and core aspirations, think about it this way. If you're out there listening, you have a bunch of friends, most likely. Most likely, if you're into personal development, most of your associations are. If they're not, then most likely you have to be a little bit less into personal development while you're around those specific friends. Why? Because that is not a core value that's aligned, or a core aspiration that's aligned. And so the fear of failure is a fear of being left behind by someone who is aspiring to greater. And Kevin, early in life, didn't have a ton of aspirations. Didn't go to college, didn't chase huge goals necessarily. Lived a lot in the now, and that's okay. Focused on your character, genuinely. It's awesome. I was the opposite. I focused very much on my core aspirations, and when I drank, I would care mostly about the now. And so naturally, I would drink around most people that were focused on the now, and then I would go back to being the natural way that I am, which is very aspirational. And that's kind of where this episode came up. Are you more afraid to leave people behind and to not be relatable and to not have a lot in common with the people you grew up around or the people you're around now? Or are you more afraid they're going to outgrow you? And Kevin often tells the story about his ex-girlfriend who wanted to go to California, and he didn't want her to go because he was afraid he would be left behind. And I think that you're usually on one of two of these extremes.
I think about it like, okay, if I took the energy, the fear, the scarcity from being afraid to be left behind and put it into leveling up, would that have ever happened? Probably not. right? And like Alan said, you are kind of one or the other.
And if I put the energy, time, and effort into not fitting in, like all of the time and energy that I spent to try to fit in, if I took that energy to develop myself, it would have been unbelievable. So it's crazy, man.
So I am better at speaking from the fear of being left behind, just because that's something I dealt with. Leaving people behind is not a huge fear of mine. I don't know why. I think it's because in my mind it's like I have to do this. You know what I mean? If I don't keep going, I'm jeffed. I'm going to get left behind if I don't keep going. So it's kind of like, it depends on what your reference group is.
You're more afraid to be left behind than you are to leave others behind.
I mean, I work with you. I'm not going to leave you behind. The few people, there's a reason I have the people I have in my life, because they're growing at similar rates. And again, that's nothing against anybody else. But we have very big goals, so we have to grow. If I want to accomplish my dreams, I have to at least grow at the level I'm growing to keep up with you. Right?
I suppose.
So for me, it's like, I can just speak better to that side of it, because it's always been a fear of mine to be left behind. If you feel that way, I think you have to dive into your own. What is this podcast about? Self-improvement, right? It's self-improvement. But after you get done this podcast, then what are you doing? Are you doing the habits? Are you journaling? Are you meditating? Are you going to the gym? Are you actually doing the things that level up your life, love, health, and wealth? Mm-hmm. Because the only way not to get left behind, there's a couple. One way is only surround yourself with people who are quote-unquote behind you. That's one way, right? Okay, I want to make sure I didn't steal the other title for the episode for later in the week. Or the other thing is you grow faster than everybody else. Make sure that you're growing and all in on self-improvement. Either you surround yourself with people who aren't doing it and you pretend to be them, or you lean into the person that you really want to be. And I think a lot of people get caught between two lives.
Right.
I said this to somebody. They basically said, I'm afraid to leave people behind. And I said, I can understand that. I said, the one thing, the important takeaway is these people wouldn't even be in your life if you just were who you were supposed to be. Right? You're not necessarily doing them, maybe you're doing them a favor, but you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not being who you want to be.
I know.
Right? Now, on the other end, if you're afraid to be left behind, if that is a deep fear you have, let's figure out where it comes from. For me, it's because my dad left when I was a kid, so I think ingrained in me was oh, you're not good enough. The person who's supposed to love you isn't there, right? But then use that shit as motivation. Use that adversity as look, this is the underdog mentality Dean Graziosi talked about when we interviewed him, 200 episodes ago, however many it was. If you have that fear, use that as motivation.
Kev, I don't know if I've ever been afraid to be left behind.
It makes sense.
I haven't.
It makes sense.
I don't think
I've
No, this is an interesting conversation. I've never actually been afraid to be left behind by anyone.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Of course success was my fear. Okay, challenging pivot here.
Push-ups.
Yeah, right. If you're out there listening to this right now, are you more afraid to be left behind by those you love, or are you afraid to leave those you love behind? I think this is fairly binary. You are more likely one or the other. Do you struggle with self-confidence, or do you struggle with humility? It's kind of the drive to 5 here. Okay, if you are afraid to be left behind, what should they do from your perspective?
The easiest thing would be get better, whatever that means. Get rid of the reasons you would be left behind. Because what is this whole thing about? You either don't feel good enough to stay in the room, or you're afraid you're too good to stay in the room. And that's all it is at the end of the day. And again, Alan and I aren't saying that these people are bad or not valuable or anything like that. But if you really want to maximize your potential and get to the next level, okay, if you want to get to the next level, if the people in your life don't want to get to the next level, you either have to find new people or stay where you are to stay at the level they're at. And if you're afraid, if the people in your life are getting to the next level and you're afraid that you can't, then it's just that pivot of figuring out, okay, what does that look like? Like, how are the people in your life getting to the next level? Do they have coaches? Are they taking courses? What books are they reading? What are their habits? Model what they're doing.
If you're on Kevin's end of Drive to 5, you most likely have, whether you're aware of it or not, some level of a belief that other people are more talented than you.
Smarter, probably.
Smarter,
too.
yeah, smarter or more talented or whatever. I don't believe that's really true. I think, I mean, maybe it is in some cases. But you can use other virtues like work ethic and discipline and studying harder that I think in the long run will matter way more. And I think that's what an underdog is. It's someone who maybe isn't as big or strong or fast yet, but is willing to do things other people aren't willing to do, which in the long run matters so much.
So I had, quick story. Taryn and I moved this weekend, and we hired a moving company to help us. And one of the kids, I joked with Taryn. I said, hopefully the kids who show up are like kind of jacked, because like we have some heavy stuff. And the kid who showed up was jacked.
Nice.
He was 20 years old.
Manifested it.
I manifested it. 20 years old and like in unrealistic shape.
Nice.
I was like, hell yeah, good for you. At the end of the day, this kid was hustling, like running up the stairs with 50 pounds in his hand. It was wild.
Nice.
He said, yeah, I don't really know what I want to do with my life. I'm just like, I'm doing this for now. I'm going to figure it out as I go. I said, hey, man, I mean this with like, just listen to me when I say this. If you work hard like this everywhere you go, you will be uber successful. I can guarantee it. I can guarantee it. He told me he dropped out of high school in grade 10.
Oh, wow.
Is he the smartest person? I don't know.
Right.
He dropped out of high school, so I'm assuming probably not.
With a strong mentor, he'd be unstoppable.
Can he outwork most people? Yeah.
Right.
So what does he have to do to get to the next level to make sure that he doesn't get outgrown? Outwork.
Yeah.
If you don't want to get outgrown, outwork. Outsmart. Outlast.
Out humble.
Out humble. Whatever it is.
And when I say out humble, that's the important piece. Get a mentor who does know how to succeed and just learn and work. And that's I've found that to be very true. The people who are on your end of Drive to 5, if they're humble and they use that fear of being left behind as motivation to learn, they're like unstoppable because they already have the work.
Ladies and gentlemen, one of the biggest issues for our listeners that we've seen is not everybody has people in their corner trying to lift them to the next level, and even the people who are trying to help don't always know how.
That's why Kevin and I created Next Level Group Coaching. It's a 3-month program on teams of 10 with all people committed to achieving their goals. Click the link in the show notes for more information.
And we only take 10 people at a time, so make sure you get in quick.
Amy wouldn't mind me using her as an example of this. So Amy Diaz, our assistant, you know Amy if you're listening most likely, she grew up with a lot of Ivy Leaguers, people who were unbelievably smart, Stanford and all that, and she grew up with siblings who were naturally intelligent. And she never felt naturally intelligent. She just outworked and outstudied everybody. She probably studied for her 3.8 in school more than I've maybe ever studied ever. And my major was really challenging, so I actually had to study like a ridiculous amount. But in high school, yeah, I studied hard, but I also it kind of did come naturally. Like intellectual stuff always kind of came easy to me. And I think that with Amy having the right guidance now, the right coaches and mentors and community, she's got the virtues, she's got the work ethic. I mean, she has a full-time job. She is in here on every Sunday working with me. Like, her work ethic is there. And talent, in my opinion, is not what matters most in the long run. Talent matters most in the long run if you have hard work and consistency and discipline and humility. Oftentimes, talent creates a lack of humility, which actually in the long run can be a bad thing. I digress. Okay, so if you're on Kevin's end and you're afraid to be left behind, you said out-humility people, outwork people. Like, develop those virtues. Use that fear as motivation to get better.
And understand that it's the limiting beliefs are just beliefs. It's probably not a fact. Like, this was a huge fear of mine. It still is that I'm going to be left behind, always.
It still is?
To a degree, yeah. Yeah. I think it's a fear that I operate with.
And don't you think that without that fear, you wouldn't be nearly as hardworking?
Yeah.
It's
It's about how do you control, how do you bottle it? How do you take it and make something that could be destructive constructive? Really, it's
How do you do that? You personally?
continue proving that it's not right.
How? Give me an example.
Getting out of your comfort zone and facing the fear. Like, one of my biggest fears is being left behind. I happen to work with somebody very exceptional, so I get tested constantly.
And so what do you do about that?
Reflect and understand that it usually goes way better than I expected. And, like, then look at it. Like, there's things I'm way better at than you are.
For sure.
There's things you're way better at than me. Like, understand where your value is. Am I going to out IQ you? No, that's not in the cards for me, most likely. But are there other things that I can outdo you on? And again, it's not about competition. But sure, yeah.
Right.
Right?
For
Maybe
sure.
relating to people, maybe I'm a little bit better at. So understanding what your unique
Yeah.
strengths are,
So important.
I think it's so important because that's why we work so well together.
I think everyone has a genius zone.
Hmm.
I really do. But the timer just went off, and I just want to make sure that we we work on both sides of this equation. So if you're out there and you resonate with, I am afraid to be left behind, understand that, try to transfer that energy of fear of being left behind into productivity and learning and humility and work ethic, whatever your virtues are. If you're on my end and you're afraid to leave people behind, it's a little different. It's almost like, and the truth of the matter is, and I want to say this, I do think it's somewhat of a valid fear. I think on both ends it might be a valid fear. If you're afraid to be left behind, if you don't get better, you probably will.
Probably.
And if you're afraid to leave others behind, I think it's because you have a deep belief in your own potential, and you probably are very talented, and the world deserves your gifts, and it's cowardly not to develop them. And this is hard for me to say because I've struggled with this so much in my life. I think the fear is somewhat valid because my fear of success, once we identified it, and this was at a speech, long story very short here, I got pulled up on stage, and Shauna Pelton brought us through the 5 major fears. One of them is a fear of success. And Kevin basically said, like, ask him if he's afraid of success during this sort of meditation and this, like, inner child healing, which was unbelievable. I was crying. It was the whole thing. When I identified that, everything started to shift for me because I started to realize I'm not afraid of failure almost at all. I honestly, in a weird way, almost crave failure. It's like this weird thing, maybe too much. You know, it's like, why not just get a W, right? I'm not afraid of failure. I don't think I am. I really don't. I almost want the challenge to be so beyond what I'm capable of that I just get better. Okay. The fear of success stems from a fear of leaving others behind and being alone. And I've found no exception to this. There's certain people out there that have so much self-belief and so much natural abilities and so much potential that I think they know deep down that if I were to really harness this and do something with it, I would have to say goodbye to so many of the people I love. And it's valid because I actually don't spend almost any time anymore with any of my high school friends, any of my college friends, or any of my corporate friends. So I remember at one point I said, I'm going to be in 11 different weddings. Not the best man. I'll be the best man in like 4 or 5. And I remember thinking to myself, like, how am I going to do all these weddings? I'm going to be in the wedding party of 11 different weddings, Ryan Bliss and all my best friends, all this stuff. I remember at one point I had so many best friends. And it's like best friends means best, meaning one. Like, so long story long here. I had so many associations. I had my high school friends who I brought to college and we partied a lot. I had my college friends who I brought to corporate. I brought them to Cognex. I remember I got referral bonuses, blah, blah, blah. Okay. In corporate, after my car accident, that's when I started to stop. I started to just lean into my own potential and to stop trying to fit in anywhere else. And now, here I am 6 years later, almost 7 years
20
later.
years later.
Yeah, 30 years later. No, 6 or 7 years later from that car accident. And I don't really spend any time with anyone that I used to spend a lot of time with. So the fear is valid. If you're out there and you are on my end, the fear is valid. But that doesn't mean that it's okay to let that fear control you. I regret not maximizing my potential. I spent a lot of time in a lot of rooms, and that's my choice. And these aren't bad people, but I spent a lot of time with people who are not like me, and I tried to be like them. And I know this in my heart of hearts. I made a mistake. I should have leaned into who I aspire to be, and I should have allowed that to attract the right persons, places, things, and ideas. And if you're out there right now, whether you're afraid to be left behind or you're afraid to leave others behind, just please, please, please don't let that fear control you any longer.
I think the answer on both ends is to get better.
Yeah.
Genuinely.
Yeah.
If you are afraid of being left behind and all you think about is the fear of being left behind, you probably will be. The best example is my ex going to California. That is the best example. I was so afraid and spent my energy trying to stop her from getting to the next level, where I bet you she was probably afraid to leave me behind.
Yes.
And guess what? Both things happened.
Yep. You manifest what you focus on.
So, yeah, at the end of the day, particularly if you're on my end, make sure you're learning and make sure you're pouring value into yourself, because it's probably false. Like, your belief, if you allow it to manifest itself, it might come true. But, like, I see this all the time with people where they say, like, oh, I'm not good enough to do this. And it's like, yeah, you are. I just want you to do it. Like, you're fine. You're fine. You just got to keep going.
Right.
Even if they have results that they didn't think they'd get, they still don't think they're good enough to get them. It's this weird paradox. But it's interesting.
Very last thing I'll say for anyone on my end, remember, you'll have the choice. And I don't spend time with anyone from high school, college, or corporate, not because I can't. It's a choice. So this whole fear of leaving others behind, you never really leave them behind.
Oh.
You can always go back. You know? You really can always go back. So just remember that. If you are on my end, those people, I still care about them deeply, and I can still hit them up if I want to. It's not like I'm lonely, right? You just trust that the universe will the law of attraction will start to work for you when you. At the end of the day, like Kevin said, the solution is be more of you.
Right. It's the only
grow
solution.
whatever you are, right? And then the law of attraction will work for you rather than against you.
And so you just started working with somebody who this happened with.
Yeah.
The only reason you started working with them is because they leaned into who they actually were.
I know. Interesting. So, yeah, so this whole episode actually came about, as you know, in the opening, from this person. And actually, she's decided to kind of lean more into who she wants to be. And that's actually why we're working together. Because she wants to become more. So she's had some really successful business months. She's an entrepreneur. And she's ready to really lean into this. And the last thing I'll say here is, if you feel like you're in lonely land, this is lonely land. Lonely land means you don't fully fit in with your old associations, your old friends. You don't fully fit in there. You feel a little weird there. But you also kind of don't fully fit in with the people at the next level either. You're kind of like, well, I'm not really fully here yet, but I'm definitely not there. That's lonely land. If you need help getting through lonely land, reach out to Kevin or myself. If you're on Kevin's end and you struggle with being afraid to be left behind by those people that are at the next level, he'll help you. If you're on my end and you're afraid to leave the other people behind, reach out. We can help you. We've been through this. DM us on Instagram. @NeverQuitKid is Kevin. I'm at @Lazaros88, ALAZAROS88 on Instagram. We would love to help you. We both have a couple more spots. We've both gotten a few clients lately. We're absolutely blessed, and we have a couple more spots waiting. If you're struggling with this, please reach out.
Yeah, we have a lot of, honestly, and it's way more common than you think.
Yeah.
Almost everybody is on one end or the other.
For sure.
So don't feel like you're alone. I'm on one end. Alan's on the other end, so we are here for you if you need us. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Up next, we have the Q&A from last week's Meetup Monday. We're going to be talking all about adversity and what to do with adversity and how to make sure that you are weathering the storm of life, because at the end of the day, life gets rough.
Oh, yeah.
The waters get choppy, but we must continue. We hope you enjoyed this. We love you. We appreciate you. And as always, we do not have fans. We have family. We will talk to you tomorrow.
Talk to you on the next one.
Bye.